As business owners, we make decisions that not only affect our lives, but the lives of our employees and contractors and family and clients and customers and everybody else. And sometimes those decisions can be quite heavy. Sometimes those decisions can have, unintended consequences, if you will, or intended consequences that can be far-reaching. And it's important that we get it right. It's important that we really take the time to make the right decision.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
And welcome to the program, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out with you once again at the podcast chair. This is your first time. Welcome to the program. If you're a longtime listener, welcome back. I want to share with you one of the tools that I use in the coaching process. And typically I don't go through this step by step with individuals. At least I share with them the steps, but then usually allow them to do this on their own. Usually the time that I spend with them is much more valuable than taking the step-by-step process to go through this. But this is one of those tools that I teach appraisers and business owners to utilize in their own life. And I want to share it with you today. I want to pause here, remind you, of course, we are sponsored by a variety of companies. First of all, A la Mode. A la Mode, of course, is it's the process of becoming better at what you do, because it is the technology and the tools that allow you to do so. Check them out. Go to alamode.com. It's ALAMODE, or you can call them at 800 A la Mode. We're sponsored, of course, by OREP Insurance. OREP covers you when you need it most. There's a lot of questions out there as to what types of products will be covered. Well, trust me, folks, I've looked into this. OREP is one that covers, they cover you. Check them out. Reach out to them. It's orep.org. It's OREP.org. Finally, we're sponsored by DataMaster. DataMaster 6 rolling out across the country. If you thought the first couple versions of DataMaster saved you money and time, wait till you see DataMaster 6. Absolutely incredible process that will allow you to start doing analysis before you even jump into the appraisal report. It is robust, it's amazing, and you can find it at datamasterusa.com. All right, folks, we make decisions on a regular basis. As business owners, we make decisions that not only affect our lives, but the lives of our employees and contractors and family and clients and customers and everybody else. And sometimes those decisions can be quite heavy. Sometimes those decisions can have, unintended consequences, if you will, or intended consequences that can be far-reaching. And it's important that we get it right. It's important that we really take the time to make the right decisions. Now, I'm going to caveat that and say that you can go through this process that I'm going to share with you today. And you can do it right, and you can do it thoroughly, and you can do it in every aspect. And even then, you're going to find times when it just doesn't work. When something falls through, when something doesn't work the way that you think it will, when there are going to be unknowns that you have no way of knowing because you don't know what you don't know. I've shared with you the experience. One of the biggest life lessons that I learned, both in time and money, was when I started up a non-related business to appraisal. Spent 3.5 years and over $100,000 on something that ultimately failed. And though I would not go through it again, I learned some great lessons through that. But I'll tell you, I went through this very process, the process I'm going to share with you today, to make the decision to get into the business, and multiple sub-decisions throughout the process, and yet ultimately it still failed. In other words, the tool that I give you today is not foolproof, just as a hammer in your toolbox is not foolproof. A hammer can be used for many different things. It is a tool. And though it is an important tool, meaning what I'm going to share with you today, it is not foolproof. and you are still going to have to learn life lessons through this process. But I will tell you this, I guarantee this. The more often that you use this tool, less times you're going to see failure. Because many people, even with big decisions, make decisions emotionally. Now, we're going to talk about emotion as we get down the road here just a little bit because, and I'm the first one to admit it, emotion does play an important role in the decisions that we make, and we should not just discount the emotion. In fact, you'll find at the end of the program today, I'm going to talk about how emotion ultimately should be your first and foremost reason to do or not do something. Yes, you heard me. Emotion should be a big player in the decision-making process. However, that emotion should only come after the logic. That emotion should only come after the process that you go through of studying, researching, looking at every aspect. All right, what is the tool, Dustin? Glad you asked. The tool is called the Decision Machine. Okay? Yes, it's a cheesy name, and yes, I made it up. I'll take full credit. Okay? And you know what? On the surface, you're going to say, well, Dustin, that's just a pro-cons list. Well, maybe it is, but I think that there's 3 or 4 sub-principles that I'm going to teach you here today that could make all the difference. Okay, this is different than just making a list of pros and cons in a decision that you're going to make. It goes deeper, and there are some tools within the tool that I'm going to teach you today, which ultimately could be the decision maker beyond just the surface. And what I mean by that is just a simple pro-cons list may help you to make a decision, but it's probably not going to get to the root of the decision or sub-decisions that may make or break ultimately your success or failure in those decisions. Okay? So get out a pen and paper. In fact, this starts with a pen and paper. And if you're driving, just, take mental note. And next time you need to make a decision, you might want to rewind and re-listen to this podcast. By the way, let me just pause here and just totally go down a tangent because it just popped into my mind. We're actually coming up on the 500th episode of the Appraiser Coach podcast. And I am reaching out to you, my listeners, especially my loyal listeners, those who have listened for many, many years. By the way, 500, what does that mean? Well, we put out 2 podcasts a week on average, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. But ultimately, that comes up to about 5 years that we've been on the air. And it's been a blessing. It's been an awesome experience. It's been very humbling to receive your feedback and hear from you about how this podcast has helped. We've tried to take your suggestions as much as possible because, hey, that's important to us. But ultimately, I want to find out what you want to hear on the 500th episode. Reach out to me, the coach at theappraisercoach.com, and let me know. What do you want to hear for the 500th episode? Help me be creative. Help me make it something memorable. We do record these weeks, sometimes months in advance, so the sooner the better on this. But let me know. All right, back into the program. You got your pen and paper ready. Again, if you're driving, just take mental note. Come back to this later. But this is what you're going to do. You're going to divide the paper into, basically put a cross in the paper. So 4 sections, okay? 4 sections. You got a line straight down in the middle, and then you've got a line from left to right, okay? This is how I start the process of the decision machine. And so now you've got basically 4 different categories, but 2 possible outcomes. Let me explain, okay? So on that piece of paper, on the top left as you're reading, top left should be decision number 1, and top right should be decision number 2. Just label those things, okay? So let's use a hypothetical today. Let me think. Something a decision an appraiser might. Okay, let's think. How about paperless? Going paperless. Okay, so you've been an individual that has used paper for years and years and years. You've used manila folders, and it's time to decide whether or not you're going to go paperless. So on the top right, you're going to put paperless. On the top left, you're going to put paper. Okay, or basically stick with the status quo. All right. Now underneath where it says paperless on the top left, you're going to put pros, okay? And then down from that in the second category, the second quadrant, still on the left, but down below, you're going to put cons, okay? Straight across from that, On the right, you're going to put cons. So this is lower left, cons, and then right above that, you're going to put pros. Okay? So basically, you have 2 pros on the top, one for papered, one for paperless. And on the bottom, you're going to have 2 cons, again, one for papered and one for paperless. Make sense? So you got 4 quadrants. Yes, it's a little bit different than your typical pros cons list, right? Because the decision that you're making has to do with 2 different decisions. And a lot of times we do the pro con list incorrectly because we simply put a line down the middle and we say, okay, going paperless, pros, cons. Well, the problem is you're missing 2 very important ingredients because there's really a pros and cons to both decisions. Therefore, there are 4 sets of lists. Make sense? Okay. So we're talking rhetorically about going paperless or staying papered. And now what? Well, I'll tell you when we get back from the break. I want to pause here, remind you that we are sponsored by a la mode. A la mode, of course, is, well, I just used it today, jumped on and was able to quickly add an addendum to a report that I had already done. Within that addendum, I was able to use a quick list that I have used multiple times in the past. Have you ever noticed how AMCs and clients typically ask the same questions over and over and over again? And smart appraisers will use CYA language. And yes, they're a little bit boilerplate, but hey, they work. But, what if it's something that's not used every time, but it is used often enough that you don't want to have to retype that sentence? You don't want to have to retype that paragraph. You don't want to have to retype the entire page. Okay? I actually have an entire addendum that is a quick list that it's about maybe 200 words long that talks about solar and the experiment that I used in my area to find or not find value when it comes to solar. And so now when I'm asked a question about solar, which is the case here, I was able to log in, get into Total, open up an addendum page, double click on the solar addendum, and all of a sudden those 200 words were filled in again for me. I read through them quickly to make sure they applied to this specific situation. They did, and I hit send. It was as easy as about maybe 5 minutes, start to finish. That's how a la mode will help to save you time, in addition to many other tools. Call them today at 800 a la mode, or pick up your computer and type in www.alamode.com. Another way that you can save 30 to 60 minutes per report, that's with Datamaster 1 and 2, by the way, is with datamasterusa.com. Go there, check them out. And if you're lucky enough to be in an area that Datamaster 6 has rolled out to already, wow, folks, talk about taking it to the next level. Folks, trust me when I say that these are the tools that appraisers need to be using in the future as things speed up. You need to become more efficient, you need to become more effective, and at the same time, you need to have higher quality reports. Datamaster will help you to do that. It's datamasterusa.com. Again, datamasterusa.com. Finally, sponsored by OREP Insurance. Just finished with one of 2 CE classes that I took through OREP. Yeah, when you think about CE, do you think about your E&O provider? Well, I do. And I'll tell you what, if that isn't cool enough that I get 7 hours and then another 7 hours in a couple of weeks when I take their next class, so 14 hours of CE in all 3 states that I'm licensed in, by the way. But let me just put the cherry on the top here. It was free. Yeah, that's right. FREE, free CE. That's one of the things that OREP will provide for you. Let me ask you something. Does your E&O do that? Folks, think about it this way. I don't know what the cost of your E&O is, okay? But CE like that's going to cost me $300 to $500. Free, okay? Add that or subtract that, as the case may be, from the cost of your E&O and tell me if it's not worth it to check out OREP. It's orep.org. It's OREP.org. Welcome back to the program. Folks, we're talking about the decision machine today. I'm walking you through it. By the way, lots of thunder going on outside my window, a little bit of a spring rainstorm, so hopefully that doesn't disrupt. I think it's pretty insulated, but if you hear some rumbling in the back, that's what's going on. All right, the decision machine is what we're working through today. You've got a pen and paper out. You've divided it into 4 quadrants. On one side, you've got going paperless. The other side, you've got staying papered. And then you've got pros at the top, cons at the bottom. All right, now with a typical pro-cons list, you're going to start listing. You're going to start putting down. I would start with those that you know or think you know, okay, your assumptions, if you will. Okay, now you don't know what you don't know. And we'll get to that in just a second, but you do know some things, okay? You do know some pros and you do know some cons. By the way, I'm going off the top of my head here. I have nothing written down, but let's think about it for just a second. So pros, for going paperless, you might put, one of the pros might be saving money, okay? You're not going to have as much paper bought, ink, saving time. Maybe on the con side, you're going to have a learning curve, okay? It's going to take you time. You're used to doing things a certain way, and anytime there's change, well, there's change, and that's challenging, okay? So then we're going to skip over to the other side on the top of the papered. One of the top things you're going to probably list, or this is something you know, it's something you're used to, and your comfort bubble is your comfort bubble, right? It's important to be able to put that down as well. There is a benefit to having paper in front of you, especially if you're driving around. You're used to taking, say, the MLS sheets and putting a folder in front of you. There's a pro of being able to take a pen and write on a piece of paper, right? Different notes and different things. And again, this is something you're used to. On the bottom, cons, again, it might be more expensive, might keep you held back. It certainly keeps you in one spot. It's very difficult to hire people. Wow, it's raining outside. I mean, just an absolute downpour. So hopefully that's not distracting. It's probably more distracting me pointing it out than it is actually going on. But if you hear some rumbling, if you hear some, it's really hitting the window. So anyway, that's what that little bit of noise is in the background. But anyway, so as you can imagine, part of the decision machine is writing down what you know or think you know. Okay, you start listing those things. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to start to do some research. Okay, maybe you're going to Google it. You're going to find out what the pros and cons are. Maybe you're going to reach out to other peers, whether it be in social media or in person, other appraisers that you might know or people in similar types of industries, and you might just ask them. Those that have gone paperless, those that have stayed papered, what are some pros, what are some cons? Do as much research as you possibly can. Okay, once you have extended your creativity and you have come up with basically everything that you can possibly think of, I want you to take and put that list aside for 24 hours. Now, if this is a decision that you need to make right away, okay, which probably would not include the papered versus paperless scenario that we're going through, but if it's something you've got to decide right away, you obviously can't take this step. However, whenever you have a very challenging, difficult decision to make, I would highly recommend and encourage that you put it aside for 24 hours. Yes, you can put it aside for longer than that. If it's a life-altering decision, yes, maybe you want to take more than 24 hours. But one of the things that I have a tendency, one of my weaknesses, is this thing called paralysis of analysis. I spend so much time contemplating the pros and the cons and the different aspects that I sometimes wait way too long, and I never take the leap. I never take the jump. So be careful here. Putting it aside for 24 hours should be the rule of thumb most of the time. If it's a life-altering decision, I'm going to move to a new state, I'm going to change careers, I'm going to change spouses, those are pretty heavy-duty decisions to make in 24 hours. And I'll give you permission to extend that out some. Just don't catch yourself doing, or do catch yourself if you are doing what I do on a regular basis. Again, that is the paralysis of analysis. Thinking about it way too long and not making the decision because I'm so busy taking care of the thought process. Okay? All right, so it's been 24 hours. Now we're going to come back to our list. By the way, during that 24 hours, it's always allowed as you think of things. And by the way, my most important time to think of things is right when I first wake up. I have a habit, and I developed this habit years ago, of not jumping out of bed as soon as my eyes open. First of all, I don't use, for the most part, there's rare exceptions, but I don't use an alarm clock. I sleep until I don't need to sleep anymore. Typically, my eyes flutter open about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. Very rare that it lasts any longer than that, but I really don't need to get going for the day till about 6:30 or 7, sometimes 7:30 depending on the day, which allows me lots of time to do what I call prime time, which is a very in-depth routine. If I haven't gone over it in the podcast, I will someday and walk you through what that looks like for me. It is found, by the way, in the Go Create Some Value workshop that is found online. You can check that out at my website. But that's a process that I go through every morning. Well, almost every morning. I'm not super religious about it. I would say 3, maybe 4 mornings. I don't usually do it on the weekends, but 3 or 4 times per week, meaning work week, Monday through Friday, I typically go through the prime time. But before I even start prime time, whenever I open my eyes, I start to think about what it was I was dreaming about or what state of mind I'm in. And I'm telling you folks, that is a magical time for me. Most of my business decisions, meaning over 50%, big ones that have been successes, have happened during that little twilight time between the sleep and awake period. I'm not fully awake, I'm not fully asleep, and that's when the creativity and the juices start flowing, okay? Why do I bring that up? It's kind of an aside, but you need some time to have things just happen. And if you put your mind to work on something at night, by the way, there's lots of quotes on this. I don't have any of them in front of me. Napoleon Hill is famous for one for saying it. Jack Canfield talks about it. Tony Robbins talks about it. Success leaders out there talk about this period of time when you put your mind at work when you fall asleep, and your mind will continue to work on that problem and a lot of times solve that problem overnight. It's amazing how often that happens, and I'll wake up at 3 in the morning with an idea. By the way, if you don't have a pad and paper or a phone or something close to your bed that you can write something down on when the inspiration hits, I highly recommend you do that. I know there's a lot of negatives to having your phone next to your bed. I still do it personally. And if you have issues with that, and God bless you if you do, by the way, there's lots of reasons not to have that blue light be the last thing that you see before you go to bed. And it does tend to wake you up at 3 in the morning if you have to turn that light on. Okay. So if you can write something down, even in the dark, enough that you can read it the next morning, it will allow you to sleep a little bit better because that inspiration has come, you've woken up, you've put it down, and you can see it the next morning and be able to expand on that and make it coherent, if you will. Okay, but this 24 hours will allow you to be able to come up with some of those ideas. When I say you come up, your brain, okay, your intellect, again, works without you even trying. It's pretty amazing how that works. And then you add that information as you think about it. Okay. Let's say that you have gone through this process. It's been 24 hours. You've exhausted all of the resources that you possibly can. Guess what? It's time to tally up your score. Now, follow this. There's a principle here. I want you to number each one of those pros and cons by importance. So number each one of those pros and cons by importance, and you're going to flip-flop this, okay? So 1 is a negative, 4 is positive. Follow me on this. By the way, there's a reason that I don't use the number 3 or the number 5 or the number 10. In other words, this scale goes from 1 to 4, not 1 to 3, not 5 stars, not 10 stars. Hopefully you can acknowledge why that's important. When you use a numbering system like 1 to 4, there's no middle ground. There's no mediocrity. There's no, I can't really think of one way or the other. I'm just going to go with 3 out of 5. On a 1 to 4 scale, a 3 is a plus, a 2 is a negative. There's nothing. There's no twos and halves. You can't do that. That's cheating. You've got to give each one of these things a number. And by the way, 4 is positive, 1 is negative, so you have to flip-flop this from top to bottom because you're going to tally the score. So if we go back to our paperless example, in quadrant top left, that is pros of going paperless. One of them was saving money. My guess is that's going to be a 4, right? On the bottom, one of the cons that you have is change. Okay, my guess is that's going to be a 1 or a 2. In other words, it's really important, but on the negative side. So on the bottom, 1 is the extreme. On the top, 4 is the extreme. Follow me? Because at the end of the day, you're going to, on the bottom of each of those quadrants, on the bottom, not of each of the quadrants, but on the bottom of the sides, left and right, pros and cons. Pros and cons are top, bottom, but left and right are going to be your decisions, either staying papered on the right or going paperless on the left. And at the bottom, you're going to give a score. At the end of that process, let's say you've got a 15 on one side and you've got a 13 on the other. Now, I know what you think I'm going to say, but I'm not, actually. That may not be your ultimate decision. You're not necessarily going to go with the higher score. Now, if you want to learn more about why, I highly recommend the book by Malcolm Gladwell called Blink. If you've not read that book, I highly recommend it. It is a staple, one of the top 10 business books of the last decade. Or it may even be older than that, 2 decades. Amazing book. And ultimately, let me just give you the very slimmed down Reader's Digest version of that book. In the end, your gut is more powerful than you think it is. Yes, you can do all the analysis in the world. And by the way, doing this analysis will help you to get to your decision. So here's the thing. This book points out, Mr. Gladwell points out that many big decisions have been made in the blink of an eye. That's the name of the book, Blink. And it came from a gut reaction. And he goes into the science as to why your gut actually means something. It's not just a feeling. It's not just an emotion like we talked about in the beginning of this podcast. There's actually science behind it because your brain is able to store more information than your conscious can think of at one time. So you may think that it's an emotional decision when it's actually very logical because your brain is processing so much information that you're not even on a conscious level recognizing. So, in the end, you may go through this process and you may get a 15 on going paperless and a 13 on staying papered, but in the end, you might stay papered. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, well, Dustin, isn't that just fear? Isn't that just, I don't want to make a change? Yeah, it might be. And you need to start remembering to recognize what that is. If it is fear, and if it's just fear of change, then maybe you need to back up again and go back to the decision machine. Folks, I've been using this process both in my own life and in the lives of my clients for years. It's a powerful concept, partly because it's so simple. Many people come to me for coaching and they think that I'm going to give them these tools that are blow them away, new and modern, if you will, but they're not. You simply need someone to be able to walk you through this process of something that's fairly simple, but usually it's the simplicity that makes it powerful. That's it. That's the decision machine. I highly recommend that you use it next time you need to make a big decision in your life. By the way, I mentioned earlier the Go Create Some Value workshop, and in that workshop there's a lot of principles taught. One of them is the prime time and what I do on a regular basis that helps to make me successful. It's something I highly recommend that you take a look at and think through. You can find it on my website again at www.theappraisercoach.com. Go to products and scroll down and you will find the Go Create Some Value workshop. Thanks for joining me today, folks. Catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.